gonna fall back over.
She had followed every step she was told would keep her safe. She ended the relationship, filed reports, documented threats, and secured a court order meant to create distance. Yet, in the weeks that followed, the same man she was trying to separate from continued to appear in her life, uninvited, unexpected, and increasingly persistent. By the early hours of one September morning, his presence had become impossible to ignore. She made one final attempt to alert the world to what was happening, noting that the measures put in place were failing to stop him. Minutes later, a series of events unfolded outside her home that would expose critical gaps in the systems designed to protect people in danger. What happened next would not only end a timeline of escalating warnings, but also force an entire community to confront how easily those warnings can go unanswered. You're watching Global Crime Venue, where viral fame hides chilling secrets. From TikTok dancers and Instagram couples to rising Facebook personalities, we reveal the dark side of the spotlight. When the perfect posts turn into tragedies, we break down exactly how it all unraveled. These aren't just online stories. They're real cases with real victims. And while you're here, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new case breakdown. In our next episode, we'll dive into another shocking story of love, control, and a hidden danger that no one saw coming. Here's the untold side of what really happened. On the morning of September 14, 2025, a sequence of events began on Russell Avenue North in Minneapolis that would later become central in a homicide investigation involving a previously reported pattern of threats, domestic incidents, and documented violations of a court-ordered protection order. At approximately 8 a.m., neighbors reported hearing multiple gunshots on the block. Responding officers located a woman lying near the open driver's side door of a Jeep parked directly outside her residence. Spent shell casings were found scattered around the vehicle, and ballistic damage was visible on the door panel, window frame, and surrounding pavement. Emergency responders pronounced the woman dead at the scene. Investigators identified the victim as 34-year-old Mariah Rosanna Samuels, a Minneapolis resident and mother of two. She worked professionally as a pet groomer and was known to maintain a regular morning routine involving transportation of her children and preparation for work. The initial crime scene survey indicated no signs of forced entry, struggle inside the home, or property theft, which rapidly narrowed the scope toward a targeted attack rather than an opportunistic or random incident. Detectives immediately began mapping the timeline of the victim's final hours. According to police records, Samuels had contacted law enforcement earlier that same morning to report harassment and threatening text messages from her former partner, messages that she indicated were violations of an active order for protection issued against him in late August. Digital forensic review later confirmed that she made a public social media post shortly before the shooting referencing concerns about being followed and documenting screenshots of previous violent incidents. Video surveillance collected from residences and businesses in the area captured an individual arriving near the victim's home on a bicycle minutes before the gunfire and leaving the area shortly afterward. The figure's physical profile, clothing, and movement pattern were circulated internally, leading detectives to identify a primary suspect. Information gathered through court records, previous police reports, and the victim's earlier statements established a significant history between Samuels and her ex-boyfriend, 42-year-old David Eugene Wright. Their relationship had ended approximately 3 weeks prior, following an August 21 incident in which Samuels reported being physically assaulted, pistol-whipped, and threatened. Police filed an incident report, and Samuels obtained an emergency protective order days later, legally restricting Wright from contacting her or approaching specified locations, including her residence. Despite the protective order, subsequent text messages, eyewitness accounts, and digital evidence showed indications of repeated attempts by Wright to contact or locate Samuels in the weeks leading up to the shooting. Multiple threats referencing potential harm were documented, including one message that explicitly warned of imminent violence. These incidents were logged as violations of the protective order. In the immediate aftermath of the September 14 shooting, police executed a targeted search for Wright. He was located and detained in Anoka County less than 24 hours after the incident. During questioning, He provided statements acknowledging involvement in the shooting, according to the criminal complaint later filed by prosecutors. Initial charges included second-degree murder and unlawful possession of a firearm due to his prior felony status. Mariah Rosanna Samuels and David Eugene Wright began their relationship approximately 9 months after Wright's release from prison. Wright had a documented history of violence. In 2003, he was convicted of pointing a firearm at a former girlfriend and threatening her and her child. At the time of his relationship with Samuels, Wright was under federal supervised release for illegal firearm possession, which placed legal restrictions on his ownership of firearms and personal conduct. By mid-2025, the relationship had deteriorated significantly. On or around August 21st, Samuels ended the relationship following repeated incidents of abuse. On that day, Wright allegedly confronted her violently, pistol whipping her and choking her against a fence while threatening to kill her and members of her family. Following this assault, Samuels filed for and obtained an order for protection on August 27, which prohibited Wright from contacting her or approaching her home or workplace. Despite the protective order, Wright reportedly continued harassing and threatening Samuels. He allegedly violated the order on multiple occasions, sending intimidating messages and following her to locations she frequented. These incidents demonstrated a pattern of escalation in his behavior, including surveillance, repeated threats, and coercive tactics. Samuels documented these violations and reported them to law enforcement, while also making public appeals through social media about the stalking she was experiencing. The sequence of escalating threats, violent encounters, and repeated violations of the protective order created a documented pattern of abuse. Wright's actions during this period illustrated his disregard for legal restrictions and highlighted the ongoing risk he posed to Samuels and her family. The events immediately preceding the September 14 incident formed a continuous narrative of harassment, stalking, and potential premeditation in the weeks leading up to the fatal encounter. On the morning of September 14, 2025, Mariah Rosanna Samuels contacted law enforcement to report continued harassment from her ex-boyfriend, David Eugene Wright, who had previously violated the restraining order issued against him. Authorities noted that she received threatening messages, including one that allegedly read, "Someone is going to die tonight." Minutes later, she posted on social media describing her fear of being followed and included video evidence of prior confrontations with Wright. According to investigators, Wright approached Samuels' vehicle on Russell Avenue North while she was preparing to leave. Surveillance footage captured a male figure entering the street near her parked Jeep. Eyewitnesses reported seeing someone on a bicycle in the area at the time of the shooting. Wright allegedly drew a firearm and fired multiple shots into the vehicle. Forensic teams later recovered approximately 15 shell casings around the driver's side of the Jeep. Ballistic analysis indicated the bullets were fired from a standing position adjacent to the vehicle. The car doors were left open following the shooting. Samuels was found with multiple gunshot wounds and was pronounced dead at the scene. First responders documented the vehicle, the position of shell casings, and bullet trajectories to reconstruct the sequence of the shooting. Investigators noted that no weapons were present in her vehicle. The forensic evidence indicated the shooting was deliberate and targeted, rather than accidental. Witness statements corroborated the presence of a male individual matching Wright's description at the time of the shooting. One bystander reported hearing several shots in rapid succession and seeing the figure fleeing on a bicycle. Crime scene technicians performed a thorough sweep, collecting all ballistic evidence and photographing the positions of the vehicle and surrounding structures. Digital evidence from Samuel's phone and social media posts were preserved and entered into evidence to establish a timeline of events. The incident unfolded over a brief time span, with the approach, firing, and departure occurring within minutes. Wright fled the scene but was later identified and apprehended by police in a nearby area. Authorities reported that he was taken into custody without resistance. Law enforcement subsequently secured the firearm, shell casings, and records of threatening communications. Investigators reconstructed the sequence of events by combining digital records, video surveillance, and eyewitness testimony. Statements from neighbors and bystanders helped map the minutes before, during, and immediately after the shooting. The coordinated collection of evidence confirmed Wright as the primary suspect, and the case was escalated for prosecution based on the deliberate nature of the attack and his prior violation of legal protective measures. David Eugene Wright had a documented history of criminal activity prior to the fatal incident. In 2003, he was convicted of a domestic violence-related offense after pointing a firearm at a former partner and threatening her child. He was also federally convicted for illegal possession of firearms and was on supervised release at the time of the killing, making his possession of a gun a legal violation. After the death of Mariah Samuels, Wright was initially charged with second-degree murder and illegal possession of a firearm. Prosecutors cited his past criminal record and documented patterns of aggressive behavior as factors in determining the severity of the charges. Within weeks, the charges were upgraded to first-degree premeditated murder and first-degree murder based on domestic abuse. The premeditated murder charge reflected the assessment that Wright planned the act, while the domestic abuse murder charge recognized the ongoing pattern of coercive and violent behavior he exhibited towards Samuels over time. Investigators noted that Wright repeatedly violated a court-issued order of protection. He had engaged in an assault against Samuels on August 21, 2025, and continued to send threatening messages in violation of legal restrictions. Evidence from eyewitness accounts, social media posts, and documented threats contributed to the legal argument that Wright demonstrated intent and disregard for legal boundaries. The combination of Wright's prior convictions, his violation of legal restrictions, and documented intent formed the basis for pursuing first-degree charges. Prosecutors have indicated that conviction on either of the first-degree charges could result in life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. His criminal history, including past violent conduct and federal firearms violations, is central to the legal strategy, establishing a pattern of behavior that supports the severity of the current charges. On August 21, 2025, Wright confronted Samuels after she ended their relationship, following weeks of tension. According to court records, he arrived at a location where she was dropping off her child and assaulted her. He pistol-whipped her, grabbed her throat, pushed her against a fence, and made threats against her and her family. He also threatened her vehicle, striking windows with his firearm. Following this assault, Samuels filed for a protective order with the county court. On August 27, the court granted the Order for Protection (OFP), which legally barred Wright from contacting her or coming near specified locations, including her home, workplace, and the site of the assault. Wright was formally served with this order within days. Despite the severity of the assault and the existence of the restraining order, no dedicated investigator was assigned to the case. The police classified the incident as gone on arrival, GOA, because the suspect had already left the scene. The case remained in a backlog of similar domestic violence incidents, and no further enforcement actions were taken. Between the issuance of the restraining order and September 14, 2025, Wright's behavior escalated. He sent multiple harassing and threatening messages to Samuels, including one stating, "Man, someone going to die tonight." On the morning of September 14, Samuels contacted authorities again, reporting that Wright had violated the restraining order by sending threatening texts and appeared to be stalking her. The responding officer spent only a few minutes on the call. There was no follow-up investigation, no safety measures implemented, and no arrest action initiated. At that time, Wright had a documented history of violent behavior, prior domestic assault convictions, and prior federal firearms violations. His access to firearms and pattern of escalating threats placed him in a high-risk category. Despite these clear risk indicators, law enforcement did not assign resources to monitor him or assess the immediate threat. This failure to follow up on documented risks and restraining order violations set the stage for the fatal incident weeks later, when Wright allegedly returned to Samuel's home and committed the shooting that ended her life. Following the killing of Mariah Rosanna Samuels, authorities and civic officials initiated institutional reviews and policy adjustments. The chief of the Minneapolis Police Department (MPD) ordered a comprehensive assessment of the department's handling of domestic violence cases, including staffing, response protocols, and prioritization processes. All officers were mandated to complete retraining on domestic violence response, and procedures regarding protective orders were updated to ensure victims are directly asked whether they feel safe and that affirmative protective measures are taken when necessary. Investigations revealed that the domestic violence unit had been understaffed, consisting of only 5 members, contributing to delays and a lack of follow-up in high-risk cases. The review highlighted that systemic gaps, including the prioritization of gone on arrival (GOA) cases and insufficient assignment of investigators, had limited timely intervention. City officials proposed the creation of an independent review function for high-impact public safety cases to monitor patterns, processes, and systemic weaknesses, including audits and coordination evaluations. On the legal side, David Eugene Wright's charges were upgraded from second-degree murder and illegal firearm possession to first-degree premeditated murder and first-degree domestic abuse murder, reflecting a pattern of prior documented abuse. Conviction on the first-degree counts carries the possibility of life imprisonment without parole. The case prompted calls for reforms in domestic violence response protocols, including mandatory risk assessments, timely investigative assignments, enhanced coordination between police and prosecutorial units, and the establishment of multidisciplinary response teams to identify and intervene in high-risk situations. City leadership committed to implementing revised response protocols, increasing staffing levels for domestic violence units, and improving communication among law enforcement, prosecutors, and community-based organizations. These measures represent systemic adjustments aimed at strengthening institutional responses to domestic violence and reducing risk factors for future incidents. Following the murder of Mariah Rosanna Samuels, law enforcement agencies, city officials, and community organizations began examining the systemic factors that may have contributed to her death. The case generated significant public scrutiny of the Minneapolis Police Department's handling of domestic violence and protective order enforcement. Advocates and officials noted that despite the existence of a court-issued order of protection, which legally restricted David Eugene Wright from contacting or approaching Samuels, enforcement mechanisms were insufficient to prevent the fatal encounter. Investigations revealed that prior reports of harassment, threatening messages, and physical assault were documented but not followed by consistent law enforcement intervention or active monitoring of the suspect. The incident highlighted gaps in police procedures regarding domestic violence risk assessment. In multiple instances prior to the shooting, Samuels reported violations of the protective order and communicated her fear for personal safety, but there was no systematic evaluation to determine the level of imminent danger. Police call records and departmental reviews indicated that responding officers often categorized similar cases as low priority or gone on arrival, leaving victims without immediate protection despite explicit legal orders. This created a scenario in which an individual with a documented history of violent behavior, prior criminal convictions, and ongoing threats could act without significant risk of intervention. The legal system also faced scrutiny due to the suspect's prior criminal history. David Eugene Wright had previously been convicted of illegal firearms possession and domestic assault, and he was under federal supervised release at the time of the murder. Analysts noted that his prior offenses should have triggered heightened monitoring and stricter enforcement protocols, especially when combined with a protective order against a former partner. The intersection of federal supervision, local law enforcement jurisdiction, and court-issued protections exposed weaknesses in coordination between agencies tasked with preventing escalation of domestic violence incidents. Community organizations and advocacy groups responded to the case by calling for reforms in protective order enforcement and domestic violence investigation procedures. Recommendations included implementing mandatory risk assessment protocols for all protective order violations, assigning specific officers to follow up on reports of harassment or threats, and creating centralized systems to track high-risk individuals with histories of violence. The case also prompted discussions regarding the allocation of resources for domestic violence units, including personnel, training, and technology such as GPS monitoring for individuals subject to restraining orders. Public policy analysts noted that the case could influence legislative initiatives focused on domestic violence prevention. Lawmakers in Minnesota and advocacy organizations emphasize the importance of creating enforceable safety nets that go beyond the issuance of protective orders, suggesting that real-time monitoring, mandatory court notifications, and stricter penalties for repeated violations could reduce the likelihood of fatal outcomes. Additionally, the case prompted calls for improved communication and cooperation between law enforcement, courts, social service agencies, and community-based support organizations to ensure that victims receive continuous protection when threats persist. Media coverage of the incident also amplified public attention on systemic shortcomings. Reports highlighted the sequence of events leading to the murder, emphasizing the gap between legal protections and practical enforcement. Analysts observed that public awareness of these gaps could lead to increased pressure on municipal authorities to revise domestic violence protocols and prioritize high-risk cases more effectively. Several organizations initiated workshops and training programs aimed at both law enforcement officers and community members to improve recognition of risk factors and early warning signs of escalating domestic violence situations. The aftermath of the case revealed patterns in domestic violence that extend beyond individual incidents, including the challenges victims face in seeking protection and the risks posed by repeat offenders with prior criminal records. Statistical reviews suggested that similar gaps in enforcement and follow-up may exist in other jurisdictions, highlighting the potential for systemic reform initiatives at state and national levels. Evaluators also recommended ongoing monitoring and assessment of protective order compliance, with particular attention to individuals who have demonstrated violent or controlling behavior in the past. And that concludes today's case. But remember, this is just one of countless stories the world has yet to uncover. Here on Global Crime Venue, our mission is to uncover the facts, honor the victims who can no longer speak, and make sure their stories are never erased. If what you heard today made you think, know this, more cases are on the way that will shock you, haunt you, and change the way you look at social media and the world around you. Be sure to subscribe, tap the like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. New investigations are released regularly. And trust me, you'll want to be here when the next story breaks. Before you leave, share your thoughts in the comments. What stood out to you most in this case? Your voice keeps these stories alive. Until we meet again, stay cautious, stay informed, and never forget, justice starts with truth. Global Crime Venue, uncovering the stories behind the screen.